To my right is my colleague Sophos, and we're joined via Skype by our Australian marketing manager, Dino, who's an overclocker down under. On today's live stream, we're going through a tutorial about how to overclock. So, like yesterday's Build a PC live stream, you can ask any questions you want on the chat, and during the live stream, we'll answer them for you. First things first, yesterday we had a contest on Facebook for some awesome prizes, and those winners are Brandy and Ryan. So we'll contact you via Facebook, so make sure you watch your spam filters, and you can, get those prizes in a few weeks. For the rest of you, we do have another contest going on Facebook, so give that Facebook post a like and give it a comment, and you can enter the win. So again, today's live stream is about overclocking, and so we have here our system we built yesterday. It's a pretty standard mid-range system. We're using a Core i5 CPU, some Trident Z RAM by G-Skill, and an Intel 750 series SSD. So Dino, you are an overclocking expert down under. So our first question, is why do we overclock? Sophos, can you help us out here?
Yeah, so Dino is back live. He can hear us. So, okay, I can answer that.
Yeah,
Dino
so
okay.
Sophos, why would you overclock your system?
So we overclock our system in order to get higher performance. So we're speeding up our system so we get more FPS in games,
right,
and we get much better performance on gaming and in other applications we are running.
So effectively, it's a free upgrade, more or less.
Essentially, that's how overclocking began. So you could buy a cheap CPU and speed it up to a higher price CPU.
Okay.
So you can actually get pretty much the same performance of a higher end CPU.
Right. Okay. So when you want to overclock, what's your first step?
So you have to be actually. So there are some applications you can run in order to check the performance of your PC.
Yeah.
They are called benchmarks.
Okay.
So that's what we are going to show here tonight.
Yeah.
So we have Intel Extreme tuning utility. It's famous and popular as XTU.
Right.
So today we are going to run two presets. We are going to run our PC.
Yes.
Like after we built it, so stock frequencies, and we're going to overclock our PC to 4.5 gigahertz and compare those two speeds.
Right. So the first step, of course, is to get a benchmark, right, a baseline rather, to show to yourself, what your computer can do without overclocking.
Exactly.
Right?
That's why first step is going to run the benchmark at stock frequency, so we can show what's the baseline of our PC.
Right. So XTU is a free app. You can download that from Intel's website, and we have the link down there on the YouTube stream. Okay. So XTU, let's see it.
All right. So I will launch CPU-Z, which will show us our CPU frequency.
Okay.
So here you can see our CPU is running at stock frequency.
Right.
So I'll launch XTU now.
Okay.
And here you can click the Run Benchmark button, and it will start run.
Okay.
Down at the bottom right, you can see our CPU frequency.
Right.
It's totally stock, so here we go.
So right now, it's clearly doing something to the computer.
So XTU is actually the most heavy benchmark nowadays.
Okay.
So it loads your CPU 100% almost.
Right.
And it's AVX2 benchmark, so it's very, very heavy.
Right.
It's like running Linux at the background.
Right. Now, so what it's doing right now is it's trying to push your CPU to its limit so you can see what it can do at its full speed without overclocking.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So this takes a few minutes to do. Now, one of our first questions is, do you need any hardware that's very specific or exclusive to overclock?
No, you don't really something very specific. You just need your PC build, the one you saw yesterday.
Right.
So rather that you can actually upgrade your cooling.
Okay.
So instead of stock air cooling, you can use a upgraded water cooling or something like that.
So we have effectively a fairly standard mid-range PC. We don't have anything special on there. It's a PC that you might buy for under $1,000 if you want to play games like GTA 5 or Witcher 3.
Exactly. So here XTU finished. So our baseline score for XTU is 992 points.
Right. Okay.
We will also run a 3D benchmark. It's from FutureMark Suite.
Okay.
So it's called Skydiver. It's
Skydiver,
actually testing your PC in game standards.
Okay.
So I will close XTU. I will also have to close it from here.
So Dino, we have a score of 992 marks. What does that mean? Okay. All right, so we're on Skydiver. So Skydiver, it looks like it's supposed to simulate a very demanding game, right?
Yeah, Skydiver is actually for mid-range PCs like the one we have here. So it actually simulates a game.
Right.
Pretty much. So I'm going to start running Skydiver.
Right. So again, our CPU is a fairly standard CPU. It's just a simple K SKU. So it's not anything special. It's just a Core i5. And so again, you don't need hardware that's overclocking specific. You just need any kind of CPU or hardware. So right now, we're running this benchmark. As you can see on the screen, it's supposed to simulate just a very standard game. We have a lot of really intensive 3D rendering and some great texturing, which should push the CPU as well as GPU to the limit.
So as I said before, this benchmark is based on a GPU.
Right.
So it's more like a GPU-based benchmark.
Okay.
But you can actually see the CPU performance increasement. So after we run on overclock settings, you can figure this out.
Right. Okay. So this test is pushing the GPU as well as the CPU to see what they can do.
There are 4 tests. So the first 2 are actually GPU based.
Okay.
And the last 2, the third one is pure CPU based benchmark.
Okay.
And the last one actually combines both GPU and CPU.
So,
can I just jump in?
Sure.
So yeah, the idea, yesterday we built a PC, and so obviously, we need some way to test this PC. So you guys are now obviously testing the 3D side, and we have the 2D side as well. So these are not necessarily the only ways to test, but it's a good indication of what to expect, and then when we increase the settings, we can see the difference, right?
That's right.
And that essentially, this is what a lot of people kind of fail to do if they try to overclock. They don't really spend a little bit of time to make sure that they are stable. So you do have to make sure that the systems are stable. So effectively, we are testing stability even with this 3D setup right now.
Exactly, yeah. So we don't want a crash to occur. Definitely not. Yeah, okay, so we're running right now Skydiver. Dino, what are the other benchmarks out there that are quite popular?
Generally, when I do my initial testing of a setup, I start with a benchmark called SuperPi. So it calculates millions of pi calculations and actually puts a lot of pressure on the memory itself. And generally, the memory is the first thing that you want to test. Make sure that it's operating properly, because there are so many different memory kits on the market. It's sometimes impossible for the manufacturer to be able to make sure that they're all compatible. So if a customer, for example, buys a GIGABYTE motherboard and the memory is not on the QVL, which is the qualified vendor list, which is a list of memory modules that we test inside our labs and we certify them to work properly. So if they're not on there, and if there is an issue, you just have to spend a little bit more time to manually adjust a few settings here and there. But generally, most memory ICs are quite reliable. So SuperPi is an interesting one, Prime 95, XTU, and 3D Mark. So
Okay, so it looks like we have finished that benchmark, and so we have a score of 23090.
Yeah, so this benchmark actually gives us the opportunity to see the score breakdown.
Yeah.
So here you can see the graphics test 1, 2, and also the CPU tests.
Right, exactly. So that just shows we have a pretty standard mid-range system. It's a Core i5, a GTX 970. It's something that you'd want to buy to play latest games. Okay, what's next?
So right now we are going to overclock our PC to 4.5 gigahertz. So there are plenty ways to do that, but we prefer the most safe and easy way to go with, which is EasyTune. EasyTune is actually a Gigabyte build utility.
Okay.
You can download it from our website.
That's right, yep.
And it's actually very, very, very safe. There's no worries. You can do it at home by your own. It's okay.
Okay, so what's the first step?
I'm going to launch EasyTune from here.
I think it's important to mention that the people should download and install the App Center itself. App Center, which is on the right side, actually will automatically update all the software. So whenever there's a new update, it will prompt you to update to the latest version. So sometimes, if there's a bug fix or whatnot, App Center, very easy to use app, very important one. You should definitely always have that on your system. That will give you the ability to download essentially any application, including EasyTune, which we're showing now.
Right, exactly. So one thing first, we do have a stock speed of our CPU that's at 3.9 gigahertz.
Yep.
And we have a memory speed of 2.1 gigahertz.
Yeah.
And a pretty standard speed of 1.3 gigahertz for our GPU.
All right, so you can actually overclock every part of your PC, most of them.
Right.
So, but the parts you need to overclock most are the CPU and your memories.
Exactly. Okay.
So, memory vendors have already built-in profiles in memories.
Right.
They called XMP. So you can actually load the XMP, which is a very easy way to overclock your memory, and you don't have to worry about any other timing, right? So I'm going to the Advanced DDR-OC tab on EasyTune. And here I can actually enable my XMP profile, which is XMP profile 1 for me.
And that is for the memory.
Yeah, that is for the memory. So here I will click apply, but in order to be applied, the profile need to be applied, our PC needs to reboot.
Okay.
So I will click apply and I will reboot our PC.
Okay, so one important thing we want to bring up is what we're doing is all in this app, right? It's not in the BIOS.
Yeah, there's no BIOS, there's no BIOS tuning at all. EasyTune will do everything for you.
Okay, great.
So later we will also show how to recover from a failed setting, or if something stops working, if people don't see a screen. We'll show people how to reset CMOS. It's a very easy fix, basically, to back to standard settings. So in case anyone is worried about, creating a problem for themselves, we'll show how to do it easily to get back to stock.
Right, and that's another good point, actually, is that with EasyTune, it's impossible to do any kind of serious fatal damage to your CPU, right, Dino?
Yes, yeah. Well, look. You could, if you apply some ridiculous voltage, and if you don't have your cooler mounted properly, the CPU will throttle. But depending on how long you run it or what you do with it, you may cause some damage long term. So I guess when you install your components and you look at EasyTune, should see system monitoring to check whether the temperature of the CPU is okay. So if you, for example, have a look at the temperature and you're seeing something like 70 degrees, then you have a problem with the cooler itself not being mounted properly. So that's, I guess, one thing to double check, though.
Okay, so what's next?
So now our XMP profile is loaded.
Right.
So we're going to actually overclock our CPU. There are plenty of ways to do it. You can choose one of the ready profiles we have in EasyTune.
Okay.
But you can also do it manually.
Okay.
So we will show how to do it manually here. So you have to go to the advanced CPU OC tab in
Right.
EasyTune. You click there. Here I have, it reads my last profile, which is not loaded. So
Okay.
I have to click reset in order to go back to default settings. And I will start building up my profile.
Okay.
So as I said before, we are going to hit 4.5 gigahertz.
Right.
So all I have to do is push 45 on the CPU multiplier. So you can see all the CPU cores are 45 now.
Okay.
But you also have to push the voltage
Right.
in a safe way, of course. So
Of course. It's all very safe.
we are not going to overdo it with voltage. So I will select 1.35 volts, which is a safe range for Skylake CPUs.
Okay.
So here we go.
So essentially, when people are looking for an overclock, always look for maybe 10 or 15% increase in voltage. Anything beyond that, there's really not a lot of point trying to push harder, because all you're doing really is just increasing the heat, particularly if you're going into summertime like Australia is right now, and Northern Hemisphere obviously is going into wintertime, but you don't want to overdo the voltage, which will just affect your temperature. And if you don't have a great cooler, like the cooler that we're using now is quite basic.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you have a water cooler, then you can look at increasing the voltage some more. But try to stick to that 10 to 15% increase for regular PC.
Right.
So now I have also to click apply in order for my settings to be applied.
Okay.
So now you can see here, actually my CPU is up to 4.5 gigahertz.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
my memories are on XMP profile, which is 3.66.
Okay, so we do have a small increase in speed. So just a reminder, we do have right now a contest on our Facebook page. You can go on our Facebook page, there's a post on there, give that post a like and give it a comment, and you can enter to win some great prizes. We'll announce the winners tomorrow.
So what are we going to do now is actually run XTU again and run Skydiver again and
Right.
compare the performance with the runs we did before at stock settings.
Okay, so we want to compare the performance to see exactly how far we have an increase with our scores.
Exactly. So
Okay.
I'm starting XTU.
So while you're running XTU, the question regarding overclocking AMD or Intel that we received,
Yeah.
essentially both platforms will overclock great, but they differ in calculations, clock calculations per processor. So Intel generally tends to be more efficient. So what that means, if you're running an AMD or an Intel CPU at 4 gigahertz, Intel will outperform the AMD chip at the same frequency. But then you also have to be mindful of the price. So,
Right.
Intel chips like 6600K is a $300 chip, where you could probably buy a 4-core AMD cheaper. So you will kind of compromise on performance, but you will still, it will still be reasonable enough. It really depends on the budget and brand preference for people.
Okay.
So I will start XTU running. So as before, you can actually see the actual CPU frequency down here. And
So I noticed we also have a higher temperature.
of course, when you overclock your CPU and you raise your CPU voltage, actually,
Right.
you get higher temperatures. But
Okay.
Skylake architecture is actually not so bad, so you won't see a very high temperatures on your CPU.
Right. But so right now we're at like 63 degrees Celsius, and that's
Yep.
still a very safe temperature.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so what with Intel chips, so this is how you would, for example, check temperature that I mentioned before. So when you do an overclock, or even when you start with standard settings and run XDU, you can check the temperature of the CPU, and when it loads up, if you at stock frequency, if you see temperature above 80, usually it means that your CPU is not, or your CPU cooler is not mounted properly. So I would recommend readjusting it. So when you're overclocking and you're reaching 60 or 70, that's okay, because that's, you are increasing the voltage. So essentially you're increasing the heat. Yeah.
So it might seem, quite hot, but it's still actually in the safety zone for CPUs.
Sure. Well, these chips can run up to 90 degrees or 100 degrees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they're pretty resilient. Intel, AMD too as well. They're quite good. It's quite good technology. So they're not easy to kill.
Okay, great. So I see here, Sophos, we have a score of now 1250 marks.
Exactly. So we have actually raised our score from before over 250 points, which
Right.
is a big points difference for XTU.
Okay.
That actually means that our PC now performs much better than before.
Right, so
Yes,
we have effectively...
30% faster. Yeah.
Right, so it's a free upgrade, effectively.
Yeah.
Exactly. So next we are going to run Skydiver again.
Okay.
I have to close XTU and start 3D Mark Skydiver. So like before, you go here, you select to run Skydiver benchmark,
Right.
and here we go.
So I just want to touch on Skydiver testing. So, for example, we are trying to simulate, for example, Counter-Strike Global Offensive here. Okay.
Right.
It is a very similar sort of test that we would do if we were just to test Counter-Strike. What we're trying to do is eliminate the low FPS. So, for example, when you're attacking B site on cobblestone with smokes, 5v5, a lot of action, a lot of grenades, a lot of guns, the frames can dip sometimes significantly. So basically, what we're trying to do is eliminate those low frames. Hitting 300 frames doesn't necessarily make any difference, but when you're dipping below 150 frames on 144 hertz screen, it can actually affect the fluidity of your game and your gaming action and your reaction time. So essentially, overclocking or giving that boost and killing off some of the kind of power saving features, or giving the PC ability to run at say 4.5 gigahertz will actually eliminate some of those low frames per second, and that's what ruins people's experiences.
Exactly. Okay, so right now we have an air cooler in the computer. It's a pretty standard air cooler, but there's also water cooling kits available on the market. A number of vendors sell these kits, and they're designed for, the end user, and they're pretty easy to install. Dino, can you quickly run down why you might want to have a water cooler versus an air cooler?
Sure. So basically, you can hear it. The air cooler gets very loud because that's the downside of having an air cooler, particularly entry-level ones. The fans are not great quality. They get very loud. You can buy big air coolers, like Noctua ones are very popular. They have these 140 millimeter fans. They get much quieter. I personally, in my lab here, I use a lot of Corsair, like H100, H110, which are double, so they're 240 mil wide radiators, so they're all-in-one water coolers. They are much quieter, and the performance is exceptional. So basically, you can, even with a simple all-in-one water cooler, you can increase the amount of overclock you can get, because you will run quieter, and also you'll be able to increase your voltage more. So in effect, you will probably have another 100 or 200 megahertz more frequency on CPU, if that's what you wish to have. But essentially, a lot of people, when they're overclocking, they're also underclocking. This is actually quite an important area to note. Some people want to consume the least amount of power possible while also keeping a decent frequency. So what some people do is they will overclock a system to say 4 gigahertz, and then look to reduce the CPU voltage as much as possible to try and keep the CPU temperature down, and also to power consumption down. So for example, we are running at 1.35 voltage. You could probably get away with 1.1 voltage or 1.05 V. So 20 or 30% reduction in power consumption by decreasing the voltage on CPU. So it really depends. Some people like to go max, some people like to actually reduce power consumption and heat. So.
Okay, great. So we have finished our Skydiver benchmark, and we have a score of 26,118.
So here you can see actually an increasement of almost 3,000 points from our
first
last
test,
run, right?
yeah.
So that means again that our CPU performs much better than before because we
Right.
keep the GPU at the same clocks.
So this would translate into extra frames
Exactly.
in the
So
game.
if you this benchmark actually simulates a game.
Okay.
So that means you can actually get higher FPS in your game system, gaming
Right.
system.
Okay. So we have a free upgrade effectively. Dino, what do you think about this?
Oh, that's great. That's quite a big boost. One thing to note, though, not every game is going to have an increased front FPS. Some games will be a lot more GPU bottlenecked, and some will be CPU bottlenecked. What that essentially means is some games you will put a lot more pressure on CPU because on GPU, sorry, because the CPU is operating fast enough. So if you're running an AMD system, for example, you'll probably find that increasing CPU frequency will give you even bigger boost because the CPU is not fast enough sometimes to be able to keep up with, say, a GTX 970 that we are running, or GTX 980, or Fury X, right? So when you're having a high-end graphics card with a low-end chip, you have to try and push the chip a little harder just so that the graphics card is not struggling to get those frames, right? So but anyway, generally it is, I always recommend people give a light overclock on their systems. Like my system that I've got running here, it's a wall PC, you can see behind me there. I'm running an X99 platform. It's water cooled, and my system is overclocked to 4.5 gigahertz, but it's a 8-core, 16-thread setup, and I can control the temperature very well, so that my voltage is not too high, and also I'm not worried about lag in games, or when I'm doing video editing and stuff. I know I can get really good performance, very fast video encoding and whatnot. So.
Right. Okay. So one of the things we want to stress about overclocking with EasyTune is that it's safe. And so a lot of you guys are worried about what would happen if you have a crash. Would it damage your CPU? Would it kill your board? So on and so forth. So Sophos, why don't you show us what happens when you do have a crash?
Yeah, so I'll close.
Straight to 6 gigahertz.
So I'll start EasyTune again.
Okay.
So here we have also to mention our auto-tuning, I'll say profile. It's
Right.
actually an inbuilt kind of benchmark which check your CPU clocks.
Okay.
And it can actually clock your CPU by itself. So
Right.
you don't have to set any multipliers, any voltages.
Okay.
And it's really, really safe to go with. But of course, manual OC, you can go higher and tune your PC.
Exactly.
easier.
But you don't have to do that, right? You can
No.
use your profiles to do some overclocking.
Exactly. These are the most ever safe profiles.
Okay, so we have
you can
Eco, Default, and OC.
So in order to overclock our CPU manually, as we said before, we'll go to the Advanced CPU OC tab.
Okay.
So now the point is to push our CPU at the higher frequency. This particularly
Right.
CPU can go, right? So we can keep the voltage at the same rate, so 1.35, or
Okay.
we can increase it, and we should start increasing our CPU multiplier.
Okay.
So let's say I'll set 1.4 volts. It's still a safe voltage range to
Right.
go with. I apply, and I'll start pushing higher the multiplier. So we will go to 46. I will apply.
Okay, we're still good.
Yeah, as you
Okay.
can see, it's set. And here you can also check the CPU frequency.
Right,
It's
so we're at
4.6.
4.6 gigahertz,
Exactly.
and we're still alive. It's still good.
So I'll go to 447 multiplier.
Okay.
So 4.5 gigahertz. so it's still alive. That doesn't mean your PC is stable,
Right.
but it hasn't been crashed yet. So
Okay.
we will keep going higher and higher. So 4.8. 4.9 gigahertz. You can see here.
Let's try 5.0.
No.
Oh,
your
and
PC
it's crashed.
Ah, there we go. Woohoo!
There we
Crash.
go.
Yeah, nothing to worry about since you can wait for this screen to be completed. You can see the percentage of the who just needs
But
to
more
restart.
importantly, there's no smoke pouring out of your CPU,
No.
right? It's not on fire.
There's nothing like that is going to happen anyway. So it's really safe to go with.
Right. Again, you guys know, don't worry about safety. If you use the profiles, you'll have a great experience. You can adjust it manually if you want to. You go slowly and check your stability. And if it does crash, you know what? It's a simple blue screen of death. You restart, and you're good to go.
So here our PC actually restarted.
Okay.
And because of this OC fail,
Right.
it drove us to the BIOS.
To the
screen.
BIOS, okay.
So here you can actually choose one of those settings. So the first one actually loads the optimized default. So you go to the stock frequencies, and you have your PC booting at the stock frequency. So we will select that one
Okay.
in order to go in the OS again.
Okay, so it's a simple reboot. You go into the BIOS and you pick your default settings, and we're back to Windows, almost.
Yeah.
And
So
so-
if you want to overclock your PC again, because right now is back to the stock frequencies.
Okay.
All you have to do is actually repeat what we saw before.
Right.
So launch EasyTune, load your CPU settings, also your XMP profile, and you're ready to go.
I just want to stress that when people are overclocking, they should first increase the voltage of the CPU. So we had it at from 1.25 to 1.35, and then go in 100 megahertz increments on CPU. Don't do big jumps, say 500 megahertz up and see if it's going to work. You're better off doing small
Right.
increments, then run next to you. So go from say 4 gigahertz to 4.1, run next to you, make sure it's stable, go to 4.2. It is a time-consuming process, but you will only do this really once or twice. Once you are satisfied with your results, so
Yeah.
when you get say 4.5 and 4.6 works, and 4.7 works and 4.8 crashes, you can drop down to 4.7 or even 4.6 just to be 100% safe. That's essentially the idea behind doing this exercise if you want to overclock. So.
Exactly. So just go slow and steady, and eventually work up towards the frequency you want to, and do your testing, and just make sure it's stable. And if you do have a crash, it's not a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so on today's live stream, we did some overclocking. You guys can see that it's very simple and very straightforward. And, when you do have a crash, it's not a huge deal. Right, guys?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, thanks for watching our OC stream. If you want more of this, follow us on Facebook and on YouTube. And we'll see you later.
Did you see it?
If your objective is Mars, for example. Neither they nor the planet can stop and wait.
Did you see it?